Okay, so I'm gonna do this part really fast because I have another video on murder specifically. So you start with second-degree murder or just plain murder, and that's the unlawful killing with malice aforethought. And malice aforethought is gonna either be intent to kill, which is purposeful or knowledgeable, intent to cause grievous bodily harm, which is implied, depraved and malignant heart murder, and depraved and malignant heart murder is going to be extreme recklessness, or it's going to pass the Thomas test, which is with antisocial motive, with wanton disregard for life, does an act with such a high probability of death that it will result in death. And then we have the Phillips test, a person who knows his conduct endangers the life of another and who acts with conscious disregard for life. So Thomas and Phillips can get you there. In Alabama, they call it don't give a damn murder. In New York, they're saying reflecting wickedness, despicable. And the hypo is shooting a gun at a passing train. And also first-degree murder could be felony murder. This is separate. This is a separate felony resulting in death. Most states now identify specific felonies that fall within this. And so the felony must be inherently dangerous, so it can't be like tax evasion. It must be an independent felony, meaning the underlying felony can't be assaultive. If it is, it just merges into that assault. And if you meant to do that assault, then it could push it up to first-degree murder. And it has killing by another. And then for first-degree murder, there is the agency approach. Oh, so like this, okay, felony murder, like your accomplice does it. So here there are two different ways. There's the agency approach. Killing must be by defendant or co-felon. Killing by an innocent person cuts off felony murder. So if a policeman shoots, not gonna be on you. But on proximate cause approach, underlying felony must be proximate cause of death, but generally it will be foreseeable and therefore proximate cause. So that if during the course of a felony a police officer shoots someone, then even though it was a innocent shoot or an innocent kill, the felon will be on the hook for that murder. So once murder is found, a prosecutor is going to try to bump it up, and the defense is going to try to move it down. To move it up, the prosecution has to show intent to kill was willful with premeditation and deliberation, and it could be just a moment. There is high culpability murders like poison and torture, or there's first-degree felony murder, and you'll have to find that in the statute. And then the defense is going to try to bump it down, and they can bump it down to voluntary, and that would be there was an intent to kill, but common law says that it was in a heat of passion. Provocation reduces murder to manslaughter, where these three elements exist. There was a heat of passion, there was insufficient cooling off time, and there was legally adequate provocation, but jurisdictions are split on what that legally adequate provocation is. So if a jurisdiction uses the categorical approach, it says adequate provocation is limited to extreme assault and battery on defendant, mutual combat, D's illegal arrest, or injury, death, or abuse of a close relative, or sudden discovery of a spouse's adultery. But words are not enough. Words are not enough. And then in other jurisdictions, they use the reasonable person approach. And this is the victim's actions would inflame the passions of a reasonable person. Not necessarily murder, but they would rile a reasonable person up. I really don't like that approach. Then we have the model penal code, which they're not looking at a heat of passion. They are looking for extreme mental and emotional distress. And this means provocation reduces murder to manslaughter, where D is under the influence of an extreme mental or emotional distress for which there is reasonable explanation or excuse determined from the viewpoint of the person in the actor's situation under the circumstances as he sees them, and a person's shock, handicaps, extreme grief are considered. However, idiosyncratic moral values are not. So like extreme racists from the South, not going to be a factor that we use. And then to contrast the model penal code with the common law, you must show extreme emotional distress. You do not need a specific act of provocation for the MPC. It can be a course of conduct. It needs more subjective in approach because you're considering it from the defendant's viewpoint. There's no limitation on cooling off period, and words alone may be sufficient. And then that's voluntary manslaughter. We have involuntary, which is gross negligence, and we have misdemeanor unlawful manslaughter. So if someone dies in the commission of a misdemeanor, then involuntary. Some jurisdictions have death penalty for heightened culpability, so like first degree. And some will recognize negligent homicide or vehicular homicide, but we didn't go over those. All right, theft was another big one. This is actually the last main one we did. As far as the elements crimes, I'm just making sure I was right about that. So theft, the main one, some jurisdictions combine into one theft statute, but keep some distinctions. Another majority jurisdiction has these three. So we're going to go over these three, but some just have one, some have multiple, and they just have little distinctions. So most prevalent is larceny, and this converts from lawful possession to unlawful custody. So larceny is a trespassory taking, and carrying away of the personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive the possessor of the property. So the actus reus here is the trespassory taking from the victim's possession. So this is a little redundant, generally taking from someone, but different from just mere taking from their custody. And we'll talk through some what is, what isn't. The intent to keep must be at the time of the taking, otherwise it is appropriate taking, not trespassory. So property in D's custody, but still in D's possession. So when you're just taking custody, that's not trespassory taking. So temporary and limited use of property include, so here are some ways that it's not the case. Temporary and limited use of property, including in V's presence, going to dinner at someone's home and using their silverware. That's custody, not possession. Property furnished by employer, V, employer as the victim, and the employee. So like driving an employer's truck for deliveries, only in your custody. Property within a container given by bailer, who is the victim, and to bailee. Okay, this one's weird. The bailor gives possession to the bailee, but the bailor retains possession of what is inside the container, and the bailee has possession of the container. So if the bailee sells the whole container, no larceny. If the bailee breaks into and sells the contents of the container, then it's larceny. So this kind of sounds like storage wars. Like maybe that's why they can do it. I don't know. Anyway, property taken for fraudulent intent. That is called larceny by trick. And then lost property found by D when V's identity is reasonably ascertainable. So if D keeps it after he knows that it's ascertainable, then that's larceny. So if a ring is found on the floor of a grocery store, it's reasonable for the person to come back for it. So to take it and just leave with it, that's larceny. But if you find $1 on the ground in the middle of the street, not larceny, not likely the owner will ever come back or is ever ascertainable. So it needs to be the trespassory taking of the victim's possession, carrying away / asportation, and a mere hair's breadth will do. However, it can't just be moving it, it has to be the taking. Of personal property of another, anything but, this does not include land or anything attached to land, and for the purposes of this class, trees and crops are a part of the land, unless it's like an apple that has fallen from a tree, then the apple in the ground you can take. Okay. This is because the law is concerned with peace and stopping fights. Okay, wait, sorry. Taking from the possessor, not necessarily the owner. And this is because the law is concerned with peace and stopping fights from breaking out. An owner of an apartment cannot go in and take from a lease in possession, even though they are the owner. We focus on the legal possession here. For the purpose of this class, trees and crops, yes. Okay, and then mens rea for this is specific intent, with the contemporaneous intent to permanently deprive the possessor of their property. So joyriding, not larceny, because you're planning on returning it. However, if recklessness can be enough if you are exposing the possession to the possessor to the risk of losing their possession forever. So if you're joyriding, but you're driving in a way that will probably get it ruined and killed or all those things, probably depriving them forever. If it's a loaf of bread and you eat it, depriving forever. Levels. Grand larceny is also felony larceny, petty larceny, misdemeanor larceny. The MPC says if it's below 500, it's petty, although they don't use those terms, and above 500 is grand. Again, equivalent, but they don't use those terms. Distinctions. Larceny by trick, when the person took with fraudulent intent to take and keep. So this is like a rental car, and then and then mens rea and actus rea have to occur at the same time for the crime. But, of course, we have exceptions. Continuing trespass doctrine, if something is taken non-consensually and then D decides to keep it, this will be the continuing trespass doctrine. It starts out non-consensual without the thought of it forever, and then it changes. The claim of right, when you take something that you think is yours, it's not larceny because there's no intent there, you think it's yours. And then forced sale, if you take something and give money for it, but the person had no intention of selling it. So this was the hamburger that someone bought the hamburger, he left the room for a minute, someone came, they ate it, they put $1. That's larceny. You took. You may have paid for it, but you took it. Then we have so that is larceny. And then we have embezzlement. Embezzlement, the fraudulent conversion of personal property of another, which came into D's possession in a lawful manner with the intent to permanently deprive the owner of the property. So for this, the actus reus, the fraudulent conversion of the personal property of another, which came into the defendant's possession in a lawful manner. So this is like an employee receives it from a third party to give to their boss, but they keep it. Or a bailee takes it and they're supposed to return it, but they have no intention of ever doing that. So the mens rea here is also specific intent and with intent to permanently deprive the owner of the property. So, with the intent. And then our final larceny, or our final theft crime is false pretense. False pretense. And this is not about possession, it's about title. So obtaining title to personal property through false pretense with intent to defraud. So the actus reus here is obtaining title to personal property. Title, not possession. Contrast with larceny by trick. Again, larceny by trick is about possession. False pretenses is about the title, which we already know from property, makes you a dirty dog. If it ain't your title, you're a dirty dog. And then you're obtaining title to personal property through a false representation, and the mens rea of here with intent to defraud. This isn't like I thought it was mine. This is no. I'm a dirty dog. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. We'll do defenses in another video.